Welcome back to Worst Seats in the House. Mike Russo, Anthony LaPanta, coming to you from my house this time, Anthony, because you were out getting an early start. The sun's out. It's 40 degrees, but you were out on the golf course.
Yeah, I got to get the game tuned up. Was trying to get some short game stuff dialed in today. Perfect weather, actually, to go out and just practice. I've spent a few hours out wandering around Loggers Trail the last few days. They're not open yet, and they just kind of let me go on there to practice, which is awfully nice of them. And
wow,
but it's these kind of, I love these practice days to just go out and hit 50 balls from 50 yards and tinker with some things, and then move back to 60, and then move back to 70, and try to get some distances dialed in. Had a great practice day. I love just kind of being lost out there in your own world. There's nobody around, and maintenance crews starting to get the course ready. I think they're planning to open sometime, maybe even this weekend. But they keep hearing and getting scared away by these predictions of huge storms. And they were going to open last weekend. I was out there with the pro, and he said, well, we were going to open this weekend, but we're supposed to get 9 inches of snow or something like that. Well, we ended up getting 0. And then apparently last night, the forecast originally had been that we were supposed to get like 12 inches or something on Wednesday night. We got 0. So I told him, maybe you ought to just stop looking at the forecast and maybe stick your head out the window, and that's about as accurate.
Well, as you know, I just came back from Florida, and that's what I thought we got a storm because I saw all the advisories coming on my phone, and then I land and I'm like, where is all the snow? There's
right.
none.
We got 0.
Yeah. So a little a little inaccurate. April 7th is our next live show. That'll be at Tuttle's, April 7th at Tuttle's. And then we will try to do one before the playoffs. Can't guarantee it, but we will have 2 in April.
We'll have something before the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. And April 7th is kind of before the playoffs. Hopefully by then we have a pretty good sense that everything is ironed out, that those games in Vancouver and Calgary aren't exactly the most meaningful games in the world. I was thinking that the other day, like how hilarious it would be if we go on that trip and it's like,
and those teams are both still alive. Yeah. And, we were talking about it last night a little bit, and I know there's been some angst, and I know with some of the way the Wild struggled early on this homestand that fans were starting to get nervous. But I talked with Wes before the LA game, and then with Ryan Carter last night before we did the game against Seattle on Wednesday night. And when you really look at it, the Wild they're in a comfortable spot. They're 8 points ahead of the teams out. 2 teams would have to pass them. And all these teams that are chasing them, with the exception of St. Louis, who's playing pretty well right now, all the rest of them they lose as often as they win. So it isn't like one of these teams is about to rip off 11 out of 14 or something to finish. And
St. Louis would be the only team I'd worry, just because I feel like their schedule's pretty cupcake.
They do, but even St. Louis, they're 8 points behind. So if Minnesota, if they average a point a night, let's say they go 7-7, even worse, let's say they go 6-8. I mean, think of what St. Louis still has to go 11-3 to pass you. And not only do they have to go 11-3, but one of the other teams also has to pass you. Mm-hmm. So 2 of those teams would have to put together a stretch like that. And I just don't see it happening. I think the Wild have put themselves in a terrific spot. The win against Los Angeles was, I felt, a night that really solidified it, because this was a team playing well, a playoff team, and Minnesota beat up. Would have been easy to lose that game, and all of a sudden the margin's only 4 and things start to get tight in your mind, even if they're not tight in reality. But they won that game, followed it up with a win against Seattle. I mean, think about it if you were on the other side. If you were following a team that was 8 points out of the playoff picture, you'd be thinking right now we have little to no chance. So I think you have to be able to look at it from the reverse when you're the team on the inside and say, look, there's no need to worry. There's no need to panic. Granted, you're trying to get guys healthy, because if you get in and don't have any of these guys, it isn't going to matter anyway. But I think it's worrying about whether or not the Wild are going to get in is not necessary.
And you mentioned health. It's unbelievable.
You can't make it up.
Yeah, you can't. Marco Rossi is latest to go down, takes the shot to the inside of the knee from another friendly fire shot. This one from Matt Boldy. He went to get an MRI today. As we all know, the Wild aren't exactly the most transparent with injuries, so we'll see. From what I understood today, I don't think they're totally worried, but again, you just don't know, right? And just with the injury luck that they have, the need to be careful here, and not put them in a position where it's necessary to play, in pain and with something that could get maybe worse.
Well, I think this week has just been a microcosm of the season. There's all the excitement that Jonas Brodin's back on the ice. He's skating. He's getting close. He looks like he's not far away. In fact, I actually thought if you'd asked me last weekend, I would have guessed he was going to play by Wednesday night.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say I still think there's a really good chance he plays in the Saturday game against Buffalo. But then all of a sudden, Monday's skate, Brodin skates, you get the word that he's not going to play that night. And shortly thereafter, we find out that after morning skate, Marcus Foligno had to be pulled from the lineup that night. And then Wednesday, we find out that Marcus Johansson has been sick since postgame on Monday, and he's not going to be able to play Wednesday. And it's just every time you start to get a little twinge of optimism that somebody's close to coming back or somebody gets back, and then bang, somebody else goes down. And we had made the comment last night during the broadcast that Wednesday night against Seattle that sometimes people will just look at man games lost, and that's not always the best way to define how much injuries have impacted you.
Mm-hmm.
If you looked at dollars lost, I think it's a better way, because a lot of times you might have 82 man games missed because some seventh defenseman has been on IR all season.
Right.
That doesn't matter. Well, that's not been the case for Minnesota, and Wild fans know that. But we added it up last night, and the Wild were playing with $42 million out of the lineup, if you include the salary cap hit for the penalty for Suter and Parise. Even if you take that away, $28 million sitting on the sidelines. There aren't very many teams that could do that and continue to win the way the Wild have been winning.
That's why I just give John Hines and his coaching staff so much credit. I mean, he just gets these guys and the guys in the locker room, obviously, because it takes such a commitment every night to play as hard as they have to play to win because of the amount of firepower that they have out of the lineup. And yet, for the most part, they do it. And, the St. Louis game I thought was starting to get really concerning coming off the game, the loss before. And yet they buckle down these last two games against, one really tough LA team and a Seattle team that they took advantage playing on the second of back-to-back. They give up a ton of first period goals. The Wild, as we all know, don't score a ton of first period goals. And they come out there and they went on their toes. They were as I can't remember who was it in the locker room that said after the St. Louis game, Jake Middleton. He said we're reactive every game as opposed to being proactive, and we have to get back to being the ones that start dictating. And I thought they really did that against Seattle, and obviously they had the resiliency in a game against LA where they gave up the early goal.
Yeah, and I think even if you look at the rest of the homestand, they were flat in the first game against Pittsburgh. There's no question. The St. Louis game, I thought they played well for a while, and then that was the only time I think during this whole stretch where I thought I saw frustration leak into their game, where they had a lot of chances early, didn't score, and then it seemed to affect the way they played, and it was disappointing because it just hasn't happened very often. But really, if you look at the other games on the homestand, the win against Colorado might have been as impressive as a win they've had this season. The LA game against a Kings team that had won 5 in a row, a goalie that hadn't given up on a goal in 155 minutes coming in, and they played a terrific game that night. So really, the Pittsburgh game was a bit of a clunker. First game back on a homestand like that, day games, sometimes those can be a challenge, especially they had traveled the day before from Vancouver, and not to make excuses for it, just looking back now to say, does something make sense for why it happened? And it probably made sense that they were going to be flat that day. But the rest of the homestand, if you look at the wins, they've been pretty impressive. And now the Buffalo game's important because the next stretch is as rigorous as they'll see, with Dallas and Vegas back-to-back, New Jersey twice, the Rangers, the Islanders, It's Capitals in there too. It's a challenging stretch.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it'll be a record-breaking game for Alex Ovechkin, but it was pretty interesting. I just came back from the GM's meetings, and we'll talk about the GM's meetings during the second segment. But the one thing that's going to start to happen when he's 4 goals from breaking it is not only will Wayne Gretzky start traveling to every single Capitals game, but they're going to basically bring a traveling ceremony. on the road. And, obviously I think Ovi and the Caps would love them to break it at home. But they're going to start. I mean, there's about 15 different NHL people that's going to start traveling. Gretzky's going to start traveling. They're bringing 10 extra cameras for all the games. So they are making this out to be what it is, which is a huge moment on a record that I don't think any of us ever thought would be broken.
Right. And, we suffered a bit with that at FanDuel because we lost the Capitals game that we were supposed to have. They did trade us the Avalanche game last week. So we were able to make up for the number of games, but it's not surprising to see them say, we're going to take all these for national TV. It's one of those things that really kind of sucks about the local TV compared to national TV in the NHL. And think about it for a minute. If you're the guys with the Capitals who have called most of Alex Ovechkin's goals over his career, and now that moment, a signature moment in your career, gets taken away just because you work for a different network, that's disappointing. But I think it is cool. It's his season to me has been one of the more remarkable things I've seen in the National Hockey League, because it isn't like he's scoring meaningless goals for a team out of the playoffs.
Right.
That team has ridden him to maybe the most surprising season anywhere in the NHL. Nobody would have said that's the team that's going to be sitting on top of the Eastern Conference coming into this year. And he's been such a huge reason for it. The way he came back from injury without missing a step, it's really amazing the numbers he's putting up in big games, in big spots. And, I know there was a lot early in his career where you always compared to Crosby, and yep, he had big numbers, but Crosby won. He had big numbers, but Crosby beat him in the playoffs. And could you win with Ovi? Well, I think, obviously he's won a cup, and now this season, I think he's maybe answered that question as much as any. The way he's played this year might be as impressive as any season he's had in his career when you consider age, injury, what was left on that roster. I mean, think of the guys that are gone from when he was in his heyday. I think it's unbelievable. And Wes Walz made the prediction earlier this season on one of our broadcasts that he'd get to 1,000 goals. And I kind of laughed at him, and I was like, let's start doing the math here, bud, and think about what he'd have to do to get to 1,000. And now the way this season has gone, I'd almost be surprised if he doesn't get there.
Yeah,
I mean, you start thinking about, well, is he going to score less than 35 next year? That's hard to imagine.
Yeah.
Is he going to score less than 35 the year after that? I don't know.
Unless his pregame meal starts to be 2 Subway sandwiches and 2 Cheetos and all that. But I would have, if Wes had told me that, I would have thought the same thing based on last year. And now you just look at him, and it's just he's an absolute machine. And that team, I mean, they really, they did an unbelievable job in the offseason. And if you remember, I actually picked them to make the playoffs. But Jacob Chikrin's come in there and done, been outstanding. Their goaltending's been really good.
Strome's had a great year.
Strome's had a great year. They just are.
They turned over the roster a lot more quickly than people thought. And I think last year, the way they played down the stretch was exciting, but it certainly didn't seem like, okay, this is going to make them be the team to beat in the Eastern Conference. Logan Thompson's been great for them, but so has Charlie Lindgren.
Yeah.
He's been terrific. The goaltending they've had all year has been outstanding.
Dubois done great. McMichael's done great. Obviously, Alexei
Protas.
I mean, Brandon Duham been really, really good. So, good for the Caps. The Wild, one of their more impressive victories of the season was actually in Washington before that back-to-back road swing where they started to miss all their guys. And all of a sudden they go to Washington and Carolina win back-to-back. And then obviously then things got a little hairy with Kaprizov out of the lineup. Let's talk about a little bit more about the Wild. I do get the impression that Kaprizov is going to skate for the first time at the end of this week. I'm still not positive. The end of, I'm forgetting what day is today. I just got back from Thursday. So the end of, I think about a week from now, we're going to start to see Kaprizov on the ice. I'm still unsure on Eriksson Ek, as I reported at the time when he first came out of the lineup around February 20-something-ish, that it was supposed to be a 6 to 8 week injury. Obviously, we know Eriksson Ek and his history of wanting
6 to 8 for most people means 3 to 4 for him. I think it's about 3.5 weeks now, because I think I remember when it happened in my mind thinking that would be roughly around the end of the month, around the end of March when he'd be back.
And then obviously he's also not skating yet. Brodin's skating, getting close. As you said, we might see him against the Buffalo Sabres or next week. I also got the impression that we're going to see him middle, late week. I will say his injury, when I see him, have you seen him without his hockey pants on? Like it is like like the back of his knee is like discolored.
Yeah, and Brodin's been skating over these last few days, and as we've seen so many times throughout his career when he comes back from injury, it's been just unreal how he's looked like a guy in midseason form who hasn't missed a step in game one, where a lot of other guys look like they need a game or two to ease their way back in. The way he skates, he looks like a guy who is ready at all times, and he's looked that way during practice. It wouldn't surprise me if he jump back in and look like the same old Jonas Brodin right away. I remember
he usually does.
I don't remember one of the which injury it was, but there was one where he was having trouble even walking. And I remember the story was he went to the trainers and was like, let me just go try and skate instead. And he couldn't pass like any of the physical tests to say like, yes, your ligaments, your muscles or whatever are at the strength numbers and the levels that we need to approve that you can play. And he just said, let me just go try skating. And he jumped on the ice, looked like he was ready to go, and they let him play. And it was, that's just the way his body works. It just looks right when he's on skates, no matter how it looks when he's walking on on flat
and a lot
earth.
of injuries are like that, where it's easier to skate than walk. And then Foligno, he was playing with his injury for a while. This is not a recurrence of what he was dealing with the last couple of years. This is something that happened in a fight against Boston. So he, it's
but he skated after the team left the ice yesterday or before the Seattle game. So that was encouraging because he had taken morning skate on Monday. We were a little bit surprised when we found out that he wasn't going to be in the lineup that night. And when they said this is something that he's been fighting for a couple of games, I expected that we might not then see him for a few days, but he took part in morning skate on Wednesday and skated after the team left the ice, which leads you to believe it probably isn't a long-term thing for him either.
Or that he's just trying to stay in game shape. He was playing with this injury for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He didn't play against the Rangers. Was that the game?
He played against the Rangers.
Okay,
he didn't play
6,
against the Kings.
7. So he played with this injury for 7 straight games and then finally couldn't. So there you go. I mean, so we'll see. Marcus Johansson obviously sick, and then we'll figure out what's going on with Marco Rossi. Another juggling act with the roster. We'll see if Rossi doesn't play. Oh my Lord, we're gonna have Ryan Hartman probably first line center, Freddie Gaudreau second line, Devin Shore third line, and Gaunt's fourth line. Other option maybe go 11 forward, 7D when Brodin comes back. I
would guess they might try that. I mean, the other night when Rossi went out in the middle of the game, you were already down Eriksson Ek. Now you lose Rossi, and in the middle of the game where you couldn't make a change on your roster. So I mean, it was Hartman and Gaudreau centering, playing every other shift basically. And
the other thing that they can do. So again, Ogren is here on an emergency basis, was able to play because Johansson couldn't with Foligno. If Johansson came back and Foligno came back, but Rossi didn't, they could change his emergency to Rossi, I believe. I could be getting the math wrong in my head, but it's a juggling act every day with this roster all season long. David Juracek had some interesting comments that he made to Joe Smith, where he basically said, "Look, obviously I want to be playing, but he understands what's going on here. He's fine." He also points out that he hasn't missed a lot of Iowa games. They have barely played down there, so he's only missed 4 games since he's been up here. He's working with Andy Ness. He's working with Matt Harder. So right now, if they sent him down and called up, they would obviously need to, my guess is they send him down at some point here when Brodin comes back, because then they'll have 7D again. But if Brodin didn't come back, the issue with sending him down and then before Brodin was back, calling up an extra defenseman, is that would have been their 4 mandatory call-ups, non-emergency call-ups, and that would be it for the rest of the season. So essentially, at the trade deadline when they papered Gauntz, Shore, and Juracek to make sure they can send him down again. It left them with one call up the rest of the year, and that's why they couldn't flip him with somebody else, because they'd just be wasting a call up. So that's essentially why he's been here. It doesn't maybe answer the question of Wild fans why he hasn't been playing, but he's not a left shot D. They love the way John Merrill was playing. So really the only guy that would have come out or could have come out is Zach Bogosian, and they just don't want to do it, Anthony.
Right. Well, and I actually talked to John Hines about this quite a bit over the last couple of games. And when the team was really struggling to score, there's the thought that, well, you've got a more offensive-minded defenseman in Juracek.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a third set of defensemen that aren't going to do anything on the score sheet in Merrill and Bogosian. Is it worth at some point considering we need something to spark the offense? But the trade-off is right now they're defending as well as anybody in the NHL. Even it isn't like David Juracek's going to add a half a goal per game or more. So are you really willing to take some gambles with what might happen in your own zone in hopes of how often is he going to add a goal? Every fourth night, every fifth night, every sixth night, and may cost you more than that at the other end. Where those two, Merrill's been terrific. Bogosian's game, I think, has been better the last couple weeks and seems to be stabilizing. I thought earlier in the year he was really good. And right now, they've got a team that's bought into the fact that if they can get to 2, they've got a pretty good chance to at least pick up a point, get the game into overtime. And right now, a point per game puts them in the playoffs in all likelihood. So I think right now you don't disrupt anything. You stick with your veteran guys. You stick with the team playing the way they're playing. Now, that could change if all of a sudden you're not defending this well and you still can't score. But for right now, I wouldn't do anything on that back end other than insert Jonas Brodin.
And it's not like they traded for Shea Weber here. All right. He had 0 goals and 6 assists in 26 games in Iowa. You know, like he's not coming up and adding a half a goal a game.
No, and he made a couple plays while he was up here. He also made a handful of head scratching plays. And I think he did get better.
And the head scratching plays is clearly what they're worried about at this time of year.
No doubt.
You know, I mean, it's that simple. I mean, you go with sometimes who you trust. It's not a time to just experiment. If they were where Seattle is, he'd be playing every night probably.
Right.
You know, and that's just not the case that they are in. Zeb Boyum's in town for the Frozen Faceoff, Anthony. Looking forward to watching him play. Again, the Wild, when they're done with their NCAA tournament, will attempt to sign him. I believe that's going to happen. And I think that's roughly about it. We should definitely go to a break, but I did want to tell everybody to not miss the first ever Talks North Sports Report live show on Wednesday, March 26th at Parlay Kitchen and Bar in downtown Minneapolis. Join Mark Rosen as he sits down with John Krasinski, Lavelle E. Neal III, Jim Souhan, and myself for an all-star conversation about everything Minnesota sports, from the Wolves and the Wild's playoff push to the start of the Twins season and the Vikings free agency and draft news, and J.J. McCarthy being the quarterback one. I'll get in on that one. The show kicks off at 7 p.m., so come for the insights, stay for the amazing food and the upscale sports bar at Parlay Kitchen and Bar. The Talk North Sports Report is presented by Giggly THC Drinks, offering bold flavors, real fruit juice, and low-calorie options. The perfect drink for your next game night. See you there. That, again, is March 26th at Parlay Kitchen and Bar at 7 p.m. We'll be right back. If your heating system has been unreliable this winter, it might be time for an upgrade. Get a new high-efficiency heating and cooling system for your whole home at AquariusHomeservices.com. Schedule your free estimate today and stay warm all season long. To schedule that free estimate, go to AquariusHomeservices.com. That's AquariusHomeservices.com. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended. And don't forget to mention that Russo sent you.
When it comes to great steaks, it's all about the marbling. And there's a 1 through 12 scale for marbling that will measure what the quality is of the steak. And for Feller's Ranch Wagyu, it's some of the best you'll find. They won't sell their steaks unless they're at a marbling level of 6 to 10 on a scale of 12. It's some of the best steaks you'll find. Just for reference, USDA Prime can be called USDA Prime as long as it's at 3 or 4 on that same scale. This steak is some of the best I've had. You can find it at fellersranch.com. Their vans are in the cities every week. They can deliver it to you. There are also a couple of spots within the cities where you can pick it up. You won't be disappointed. If you're having a great meal and you want to have steak, there's no place to go that's better than Feller's Ranch.
If you're looking for a refreshing THC drink, well, check out Giggly. It tastes like your favorite cocktail with no aftertaste and just pure, bold flavor. It's made with real fruit juice and all natural ingredients. It's a Minnesota-made gem. You can find it at liquor stores and Quick Trip locations across Minnesota, or get it shipped nationwide. Plus, with a new low pricing and low-calorie options, it's the perfect guilt-free sip. Try Giggly today. Back here, Word Seats in the House, Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. Vinny, you got some thoughts this week? And then if he doesn't, we could talk about the GM's meetings.
Yeah, I'm sure Vinny's got some thoughts. My thought is, I was just looking at because we're at your house instead of mine, I don't see any Spanish wine on your counter. It's all still Sicilian, which means you haven't drank this for 2 years since we got back from Sicily. We just have started to branch into some Tempranillos and Albarinos to make sure that we're ready for this trip. And I got to say, my early returns are that I'm excited about Spanish wine. I'm looking forward to it. The stuff we've had so far has been really good.
And by the way, last call, if you want to come with us on the trip, I think it's still last call, right, Anthony?
It's close. Yeah. I know they're running out of spots and running out of time.
So defineddestinations.com. We're going July 8th to the 17th.
I think it might be 9 to 17, but it's in that
I'm going
neighborhood.
A day before. I think that's the deal.
You could be probably sitting in seat 1A or something. Yep. I'll be in seat 64C back with the rest of it. With whoever signs up today, you'll get a chance to sit close to Margot and I on the plane. So that'll be very exciting.
Exactly. And again, April 7th is our next live show. Did want to talk to everybody about the GM's meetings. Just spent some time down there.
Yep. Weren't Vinny's thoughts sent to you?
Well, he just wanted me to, if I remember correctly, go after you about how absurd it is that you say that if after they get through this buyout pain, if next year they lose in the first round, that's essentially, I can't remember the way that you phrased it last year, but that doesn't mean that the plan didn't work or
right. I think what I was saying is that there's a lot of variables that could come into play there. Where I think let's jump ahead to next year and let's say the Wild reach the playoffs and lose in the first round. That doesn't mean the plan failed, because if you look at it this year, we're looking at a very likely first round series between Toronto and Tampa, between Dallas and Colorado. I mean, if in the NHL playoffs right now, I was looking at this.
Are you saying because of the stupid playoff format?
It doesn't. Whatever playoff format you pick, there right now. I'll get to that in just a second. So what my point was about the Wild is that as long as they go into the playoffs, like if they went into the playoffs like Colorado or Dallas are this year, where they are seriously looked at as a legit contender in the West, that means as a GM you properly stocked your roster. Who knows who wins that first round series if it is between Colorado and Dallas? One of those teams that legitimately could win 4 series in a row and win the cup is going to be out in the first round. And I don't think that means that their plan was failed. It just means that they ran into another contender in the first round. Maybe the pucks didn't go their way, goaltending, injuries, you never know. I just think that
I guess his point is that when does it end? That you're always in the never-ending cycle of being in the same spot, because you can't get past the first round. And at some point you do have to show growth.
Absolutely.
And look, you're absolutely right. Like if Colorado loses to Dallas in the first round, is it the failure of all failures? No, it's probably the 2 best teams in the West that are in this format playing against each other.
But and that's my point. Yeah. So let's say next year Minnesota finishes second in the Central. They have a great year. The roster's built properly. They have a great year. They finish second, and they draw Dallas in the first round or Colorado in the first round, and they get beat. It doesn't mean the plan failed. Now, if that happened, I think you'd have to kind of look at Billy's plan as now, let's say over the next 3 or 4 years, if at some point during that time you can't always have bad luck, at one of those times it's got to be that you got the breaks too. So, but these years.
This is what your son says, that saying we caught them when they were at top is a cop out. This rebuild is to be the team and at the top and deliver. The point of the game is to win. I guess my question, why he thinks winning doesn't matter, or at some point the end all be all.
Winning does matter. Yeah. But I'm just saying that it isn't always.
I told him I think that you're just preconditioned as a Minnesotan to just accept,
I don't think so. And the point I was making about the over the years, they were in the same division as Chicago when Chicago was on top of the NHL. Mm-hmm. They played them 3 years in a row in the playoffs, and 2 of those years the Hawks won the cup. They caught Colorado when Colorado was absolutely on top. They caught Dallas when Dallas was built for their run. Do you know that over these 12 years, over the last 12 seasons, no team in the Western Conference has made the playoffs more often than Minnesota?
Right.
I mean, that
I do know that.
That's amazing. That is why this team is year in, year out a contender. All those other teams that have had their run, like look at Chicago right now. Yes, they won a couple cups right there. Now they've been at the bottom of the barrel and they're going to be for another couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Colorado, same with Dallas, same with St. Louis actually is close to the Wild. They've been similar in that way, and they did have their one run. I just think you can't just make it as simple as if you don't win in the first round, your plan failed. That's the point I'm making. And now to segue to the playoff format, and I know you've been pushing this, that it should be 1 versus 8. Most times it doesn't change very much. And this year, I looked a couple days ago. At that time, the only thing that would have changed was in the West, you would have had, instead of Dallas, Colorado, and LA, Edmonton, those matchups would have been switched. It would have been like LA, Colorado, and Edmonton, Dallas or something, which all those teams are separated by 3 points. I mean, is it really an unfair situation or unfair system? Minnesota have been playing the same team. They'd have been playing Vegas. You still would have had whoever comes in the second wild card playing Winnipeg. In the East, there would have been not even one change. And so I was looking at it yesterday, and yes, there's going to be some very good teams knocked out in the first round. But no matter what playoff format you pick to get you 16 teams, in the West, who would you say out of the 8 that are going to make the playoffs are not legitimate contenders to win it all? The second wild card, probably. I think a lot of people would look at Minnesota and say they're not poised to make a deep run. Maybe Los Angeles. I think LA's got a shot, but so the other 5, Vegas, Edmonton, Dallas, Colorado, Winnipeg, all 5 of those teams are legit contenders, right?
Right.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Would you add LA to that or not?
I probably would, just based on the fact that Kemper's won a cup and he's playing
so that's
great.
6 out of the 8. That means there are going to be 2 matchups in the first round that are with legit cup contenders.
Mm-hmm.
2 legit contenders are going to be knocked out. Go to the East.
Mm-hmm.
Florida, Toronto, Tampa, all legit contenders. In the Metro Division, if you include New Jersey, because before Jack Hughes' injury, they certainly were, but Carolina and Washington are. So even throw New Jersey in there, that's 6 again. So you're going to have 2 matchups in the first round in each conference where a legit contender is going to be knocked out. That's just life in the NHL. It's life in the playoffs. There are always going to be situations where good teams get eliminated by other good teams in the first round,
right?
Because the margin is so small.
To me, and we've discussed this till we're blue in the face, but what I don't like is that because of this schedule and the fact that essentially playing your division means nothing during the regular season as it is, a division format playoff schedule makes very little sense to begin with. If the Wild were playing Dallas 8 times like the old years and Colorado 8 times and blah, 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 then I think then division playoff format makes sense. I think there's
some validity to that argument.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if they go to 84 games, what I hope they do is just make it so you play all your division teams 4 times, the other division in your conference 3 times, and the East twice. And I would be in favor of you if you even made it to be, let's play the divisional teams 5 times. I mean, those are the games. Look at when we go to Colorado, how they build up division rivalry games, and their crowd is into it when Minnesota's there, when St. Louis is there, when Chicago is there. And the games are fun at Excel when those teams come to St. Paul. More so than I think when the LA Kings come to town or when the San Jose Sharks come to town. And I'd even be in favor of saying, all right, let's play the divisional teams 5 times and only play the Pacific twice. But I think even if it's 4 and 3, it still makes those divisional games mean more. Those are the teams you have to try to make sure you're prepared to beat. And you're in the playoffs. You're supposed to face somebody that's going to be a handful for you to beat. And I love the fact that when you start to look at that first round, other than, let's say, the 2 division winners in the East against the wild cards and maybe the same in the West, that you're looking at a series. The other series are going to be 2 teams that legitimately could not just win that series, but win the whole thing.
Right. No, I hear you. And
there aren't free passes.
Yeah.
It isn't like, oh, I got, because it's a 1-8 format, now I got a free pass in the first round. If it was a 1-8 format, Minnesota would be playing Dallas right now.
And my biggest issue with it, and it might not affect us, and hopefully does not, is just seeing the same teams over and over again, which is why I'm so hoping the Wild stick to 7th.
Yeah, and I understand that, but that's not like a competitive thing. That's just you'd like to go see somebody else.
Yeah, but I think fans
like to
are
go
bored
to
of that
Vegas.
too.
But really,
there's a reason why 95% of fans are.
But go back and look at who the Wild have played in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it isn't like they really have had huge number of playoff series against these teams,
right?
And they played over the last 12 years. They played Chicago 3 times, but that was 3 years in a row, and 2 of them were in the second round, so it wasn't like who you drew early. They've had, Dallas twice?
Yes.
St. Louis 3 times. Winnipeg only once. Nashville 0. Colorado only once.
By the way, if the Wild fall to the second wild card spot, I'm going to be very sour.
But just think, I mean, it isn't like they've seen these same teams 7 times. They've St. Louis 3 times is the most frequent opponent in there, and I think those playoff series fuel rivalries. I think it's great. And as I've said before, what I'd love to see them do is, I'd be in favor of just going to straight 1 through 4 in your division, make it and eliminate the wild card altogether. But I would love to see it where the only time you cross over into the other division is if you have to. So if both wild cards come from the Central and one has to go to the Pacific, so be it. I think it would be ridiculous like this year where there's going to be a wild card from each division, quite possibly, assuming St. Louis doesn't get in. If it's Vancouver or Calgary, you're going to have Minnesota going to the West to be playing a first-round series with Vegas, a second-round series with either Edmonton or L.A., while Vancouver or Calgary is coming to the Central to play Winnipeg.
Perfect. I love it.
And then either Dallas or Colorado. I'd just say if Minnesota and St. Louis both make it and one of them has to go to the Pacific, understood. But if you've got 4 from each division, just play in your division. Think about what it does even from game times. Now, I know Minnesota always gets 8:52 puck drops even in the Central, but if they're facing a Pacific team, every playoff game is going to start at 8:52 the whole time through.
Tough. Fans can stay up.
But you'll get to go to Vegas instead of Dallas.
100%. So, all right. So,
really, Minnesota's going to probably end up with either Vegas or Dallas, the way it looks right now. It's
100.
It's going to be one of those two in all likelihood, and either one of them, from a travel standpoint, is just fine by me.
Yep. It's truly interesting that Colorado is not pulling away. Obviously they had a tough game in Toronto yesterday where big goal goes, is blocked by Kelly Sutherland when he fell, and then Lorentz skates in and scored his big goal.
The Wild are only 2 points behind them.
I know.
We were talking about this a little bit last night.
You know who's not, who Avs fans, or if you pay attention to social media, big time waiting to make an impact? Brock Nelson.
Yeah, he hasn't done much.
No, not at all.
And I think when you look at what they gave up to go all in this year and how much they turned that roster over, it's
Cam Ritchie.
There's some pressure on that team. And Karts and I were talking about it during the Seattle broadcast that all the talk is looking over the shoulder of the Wild. They're 8 clear of the team behind them. They're only 2 behind the team in front of them.
Right.
The conversation could be more intense that direction too.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it really makes much difference if you're going to face either Dallas or Vegas in the first round. It
does to me.
It does. I know. But
I can't believe that you're not in on this with me.
No.
I mean, obviously I'm being tongue in cheek, but I'm really not.
Right. Yeah. From a travel standpoint, I would rather go to Vegas than Dallas, but I don't mind Dallas.
Yep.
In fact, I
think
love
that when the
Dallas.
series comes back here, that Joe should cover the home games and I just stay there,
just to do some background.
Just get
maybe
scout.
See if you can
maybe
have
do
coffee with Jack Eichel.
Maybe do some stories about. No, Jack better be on that trip. Maybe do some stories about what it's like to watch a game in a sports book. I don't know. So there's
we could come up with some good stories for you. And from a selfish perspective, from like you and me going on the road with the team, yes, I'd love to go to Vegas. I'd love to go to. I wouldn't mind going to Los Angeles as opposed to Winnipeg. I get all that. I'm just talking from a hockey standpoint that it doesn't really matter if you go face Vegas or you go face Dallas or you go face Edmonton. You're facing a team that's good enough to win.
Don't you actually agree though that Vegas would probably be the easier team for the Wild? We both agree that they do not match up with Dallas on a good day.
They don't.
And Vegas is not nearly as strong. They didn't make any big trade deadline moves. I'm not saying the Wild are better than them. Certainly they are unbelievable at home. The Wild haven't fared well against them, although all we do is see them on second and back-to-backs.
Right.
I just don't look at them as being a more formidable opponent than Dallas.
To be honest, there aren't any of the teams
to bring this back to a serious thing. Like
really, none of the teams in the West, though. And I know the Wild haven't had good success against Winnipeg this year, but there's always been some kind of asterisk by it with who's been out of the Wild's lineup, the rest situation. I don't feel like Winnipeg is an insurmountable opponent for the Wild. Certainly don't fear Colorado. I think they match up pretty well with Colorado. Have played well against Edmonton, played really well against LA this last time. The first 2 times they faced the Kings, I thought the Kings might be as tough a matchup for them as anybody. Yeah, Dallas, for whatever reason, and I think Dallas might be the most complete roster in the Western Conference. I'm surprised that they've never really taken off this year. I thought there'd be some stretch where they'd go 18-3 and pull away, and it just never happened.
And they'll get Heiskanen back for the playoffs,
which makes a huge difference.
Yep,
but
huge.
I love the way their team is built. I think it is a tough matchup for Minnesota.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the GM's meetings. First of all, so on the Monday, I went out to dinner with Lou Nanne. It was Elliot Friedman, Kyle Bukauskas, myself, and Eric Engels, who's based in Montreal, also their colleague at Sportsnet. So I had the car, so we drive up A1A and went right by Mar-a-Lago. They have turned that into like White House South. I mean, that is unbelievable. The security there, Secret Service, and not like when I was growing up as a kid, and you can actually look into Mar-a-Lago. But it was a real fun trip because it was, first of all, sentimental. Like, went down Worth Avenue, which they kind of call the Rodeo Drive of Florida. And I spent a lot of time there as a kid, going there with my grandparents. Then Louis picked out this restaurant, Renato's, that was just freaking unreal. Like, as good of an Italian restaurant as I've ever been to. The setting was unreal. The patio, really, really, really fun trip. And then Louis, the hardest working guy in show business, was getting on a plane the next day to go to LA for work. The guy is truly one of a kind.
There is no comparison.
Yeah.
And the life that he lives and how busy he remains and has people he's got to see in just about every city. When we were on the Seattle and Vancouver trip, it was the same thing. He's got to meet this guy for lunch, this guy for dinner. We're going to go talk to this guy who I used to do this deal with. And although he and I had lunch, and I'm not going to share the name of the place because I don't want to get him in trouble, but there was at some point in his life, he was banned from this place because of some off ice activities when he was a part of a traveling party that went there.
Right.
Like they got banned from this hotel for a while.
When he was with the North Stars.
When he was with the North Stars. But now he's allowed back in. So we went and had lunch there.
Yeah, but that was the funny part of the story, is that like years later, he still wasn't allowed in.
Exactly. That's what he said. He said I came back.
Facial recognition
I came
that a
back
casino
20 years
has.
later and they wouldn't let me in. But now he was let back in. So we had lunch there. That was fun. And yeah.
What city was that again?
It was in Vancouver.
Yeah. That guy. All right. So GM's meetings. Just a couple. Just gloss over some things and get your thoughts. One was and it was really neat. So the Monday they had the GMs go into their breakout groups and they watch, and essentially it was all about video replay. And essentially this time of year, every year at the GMs meetings, going into a very important time because they're always worried about video review in the playoffs, is that they want to button up, make sure everybody knows the rules, make sure these GMs are relating stuff back to the coaches, the video coaches and all that stuff, to understand what goalie interference is and things like that, how the rules are set for hand passes and missed stoppages and all that. And by the way, with the Ovechkin thing, they are literally like Coley Campbell said, it keeps them up at night, worried about like, what if Ovi gets the goal? It's this big hoopla. And next thing you know, like John Hines challenges like a missed hand pass or a high stick or offsides by a millimeter. So anyway, they showed the GMs and they showed us clips of video of goalie interferences to really button things down. And the one thing that was interesting is they showed the GMs 54 clips, and then they had them essentially go through. Do you think that we got it right or wrong? And of the 54, 52, the majority of the GMs voted that they got it right. There were 2 that they didn't. There was one out of the 54
I read this.
that was
It
32-0.
Yeah.
And guess which one it was?
It was Alex DeBrincat against
the
Wild.
It was Lucas Raymond's goal with DeBrincat.
Right.
It was in there. Most peculiar challenge I think I've ever seen. And that one was 32 GMs like, yeah, the league got that right. There was no goalie interference on Alex DeBrincat there on the Raymond goal.
Yeah.
But in the same game was the goal where I still think and contend that the league effed this up. And I will say that it was the first game, and this is where I think things got a little weird, is that usually there's 4 people in the video goal room and a retired ref. And if you remember, this was the first game on the Saturday in Detroit in the NHL that came out of the break with that.
It was the only game going at the time.
And there were a lot of the crew was either on vacation or going back to Toronto. So the room was not exactly fully cast. And when I showed one person that's usually making these decisions, he's like, no, I would have been one of the naysayers that said that this one shouldn't have counted. The person in the room that made the decision explained his thinking on this. But the one I'm talking about is the Dylan Larkin goal in the same game, where if you remember that goal, and this is where I don't understand how it could have counted, is that the referee, I believe it was Jake Brink, is ruling good goal on a shot by DeBrincat that hits the crossbar.
Everybody stops.
When he hits good goal, the horn goes on.
Right.
The lights are going on. So how are the Wild supposed to know that that is no longer a good goal? So naturally, guys stop playing. Eriksson Ek, who's defending Dylan Larkin, sort of
stops.
takes a break.
Right.
And Fleury clearly stopped playing.
Right.
And then Larkin realized the puck never went in, and he went in and scored it from the crease. It was kind of bang, bang, but I still think that this is one where the league, because there's no whistle, technically the play is on. I think this is one where the league still messed up.
I agree.
And
we talked about it
there was
that week.
disagreement when I showed different people this goal.
We talked about it that week that let's say Eriksson Ek keeps playing and turns around and flattens Dylan Larkin because Larkin stops when the horn goes off.
Yep.
Let's say Larkin stops, but Eriksson Ek says, I saw it hit the crossbar and turns and wipes him out. Now what happens?
Yeah.
Eriksson Ek's to the box because he
probably a major penalty for doing that after a goal.
Right. And it would have been the exact same defense that he saw it hit the crossbar, knew the puck was still alive, and kept playing. I think that's a rule that has to change where once the referee points good goal, play stops. Now you can review it, make sure that you get it right, but play has to stop.
Right.
But what was interesting is, remember when we went to the review room in Toronto, I'm going to say 8 or 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they had done the same exercise with the GMs just before we got there. And he had said that we polled him. And what was interesting about it was that almost none were unanimous. He said we'd show 8 clips.
Mm-hmm.
And on his point at that time was most of the time it was 14-12 or 16-14. And our point to them was, 2 guys look at the same play very differently. And so you can't be as hard on the referees as you'd like to be because even you guys can't agree on what should be interference and what shouldn't be, or what should have been a major and what shouldn't have been. And that is it. So I'd be curious to know what those, when they say the majority, okay, but was it 28-4 or was it 17-15?
Yeah. They gave us the breakdown. There were very few that were say 16, 17, 15.
Most were in the 20-10 range.
Now, but the big thing with goalie interference that I think we all got to look at is when a goal it goes in and there is contact between the goalie and the player, or the goalie can't challenge. The one thing that they always ask is, where is the player? Did he on his own go into the blue? So there was a goal, I believe, against Detroit too, where Brock Nelson. Well, no, it was against Nashville. Brock Nelson wipes out Saros, but Brock is in the white clearly. Saros comes out into the white, and there was a goal that was challenged that Nashville lost because Brock Nelson never went in there. There have been plays multiple times where if you go in there on your own and you don't come out, and a goalie and there's any contact, even if it's minimal, or the goalie can't challenge, if you went in there on your own, they're going to pretty much not, I would say 10 times out of 10, not allow that goal. But if you're helped in there if a goalie has time to reset, like the JT Miller one. They showed the JT Miller one against the Wild with Gustafsson in overtime against the Rangers.
Right.
That was one where I agree they got it right.
Yeah,
like that
Gus
was it.
had
That was
time to
not a
reset.
John Hines challenge. That was the league initiated challenge, and JT Miller definitely interfered with Gus, but enough time came out where he was able to reset, and at that point Braden Schneider scored. So a lot of it is you got to ask yourself, common sense is that if that sure there's contact, but if that guy went in there on his own, then sorry, it's probably not counting. So that they're trying to get it. I will say there is disagreement with a lot of people in the high up, even higher than the people in the situation room, that thinks that they're protecting goalies too much. Do you have any thought on that one?
Not really. I think they err on the other side, actually, where I think they underestimate how much contact can affect a goalie's ability to play his position. And I think sometimes they give the shooter the benefit of the doubt and say he had time to reset, where I look at it and think, who are you to say that he had time to reset? He's off balance.
Yeah.
He's trying to get himself back. And yes, he did turn and face the guy, but he still wasn't in the position he would have liked to have been in.
Right.
And to me, that means that there was interference.
Yep. And to your point there, the one thing that never, ever, ever will happen in the NHL is like in football, that play was uncatchable. So they will never, ever say, to your point, that that save would never have been made, so we're gonna just allow it. Carey Price, they told a story. Dan O'Halloran, who is a retired ref that was in the room with us, that spends a lot of time in the situation room. I think he's done more Stanley Cup Finals than anybody, but he got into this huge fight, I believe, with Jonathan Quick because Dan O'Halloran said to him, well, you would never have made that save. And Jonathan Quick basically said, who the F do you think you are to tell me I wouldn't have made that save? You have no idea. And we see miraculous saves all the time.
Right.
So that's one thing they will never do. They will not allow a goal because that thing would never have been stopped. So that's one thing that they also said. All right, let's go quickly through this. Then we'll take a break and go through some Twitter questions. All-Star Game 2026 is supposed to be this big gateway send-off to the Olympics. And next year's All-Stars are going to be all Olympians. But after the success of the Four Nations, it's clear that they want to reimagine what future All-Star games are going to look at, and it might start next year where we might not even have a game. They don't know what it's going to be. They're brainstorming all sorts of ideas. But the All-Star game that was promised to Islanders season ticket holders and the Islanders, not going to happen. I'm all for it.
We've talked about this so many times on this show and over the years. Unless you can come up with some kind of a game where the players care and where there's a competitive spirit to it, then it's not worth having the game.
Right.
And I thought they'd get there with the 3-on-3 and some kind of a cash prize for the winners, but it didn't happen. Yeah. So unless you can find something, and I've always said, go to the players, you tell us what you want. What will make you compete? Because if it's anything less than that, and I've suggested, ask the guys flat out, do you want to be there and compete? If you don't, we'll take the next guy on the list.
Right.
Until we find guys who want to.
The problem with next year's All-Star game, because they're all flying in New York because they all got to fly to JFK, is they are not really having All-Star. It's going to be all Olympians.
Right.
So these guys are going to be extra careful not to get hurt.
And that's my point, is that like next year, it makes no sense to have an All-Star game. But even in the years in between the Olympics and the whatever the Four Nations thing will be called now with more
World
than four
Cup.
nations. So every other year, you could have some kind of an All-Star, but you got to find a way and find out what the players want, what matters to them, what would get them to come there and compete. Because if they don't, and it's just an exhibition of some kind where it's like the NBA All-Star game or the NFL Pro Bowl used to be before they just went to their flag football stuff and everything, like, I couldn't care any less about that stuff. I would never watch it.
Yep. This was a Jansman News where there was a lot of news, but no news, if that makes sense. There was a lot of like stuff that we talked about, but nothing, no rule changes. But one and done decentralized draft is the big thing. Remember the GMs last year, 26-6 voted to decentralize the draft, be in their war rooms. They're bringing all 50 prospects to the Peacock Theater in LA. Well, now, of course, and Bettman never wanted it like this. Now, of course, the GMs are realizing this was a stupid idea. So it sounds like this could be a one and done type thing. And we're going to go back. CBA talks will begin the week of April 1st. Again, mostly tweaks. Nothing that's going to be, we all know when the when it's going to turn ugly. It was like a big kumbaya thing watching Marty Walsh and Gary Bettman at the Four Nations put their arms around each other. This should be a pretty simple thing. Gary clearly wants to announce it by his by game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals. No extended overtime. 74% of games this year are ending in 3-on-3. So they just don't see any reason to extend it to 7-10 minutes, whatever. There have been to date 56 shootouts. No playoff format change. The only one in the world championing that was Anthony LaPanta. I mentioned how Gretzky is going to start traveling. October 7th is the start of next year. And then I sat down with Bill Guerin. And the big thing that with the U.S. management teams and the Canadian management teams from the Four Nations they begin their debriefing of the Four Nations and began talking about roster changes for the Olympics. June 15th is when the initial 6 players will be announced. Obviously, the USA will change some of those names. And then December 31st will be the Olympic rosters. They get to add a forward, add a defenseman. Billy obviously wasn't tipping his hand, but he did say to me that style of play is something that they really talked about. Obviously, some guys are going to age out, maybe Chris Kreider, the Brad Marchands, players like that, maybe even Brock Nelson. I do wonder, Anthony, if we're going to start to see them, they were a goal away. And when you look at it and you see the year that Cole Caulfield's having and Clayton Keller's having and Tage Thompson's having and Jason Robertson, I think there's going to be changes. And I think they're going to have to add some goal scoring.
Probably. And I also think that it's when you start to talk about all those guys, I mean, there's times where it's changing of the guard for a national team.
Yep.
Where the younger players are now the go-to guys. And all of those guys you mentioned fall into that category where they bring more life, they bring more energy, they bring more scoring. But the truth is that you're also going up against the best in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a need for guys that can play other roles. I think that's what they thought going into this year. I just think maybe the guys that are on the back end of their careers, so to speak, are further down that road than what the U.S. realized.
Yep, I agree with you. Let's do this. We'll take a break, and then we'll have a quick segment to wrap up the show and do Twitter questions. We'll be right back. The weather is warming up, and that means it's time to put your augers away, and it's time to grab the boat. Let OnX Fish help you find the next best bite. The Fish app offers the most comprehensive fishing tool for increasing your success. Use the Fish app to find new places to fish and sort lakes by species, abundance, trophy, and keeper potential. OnX Fish also shows you hotspots, lake-by-lake regulations, and private and public land ownership information. Download OnX Fish on the App Store or go to onxmaps.com/fish to get more information about the app that is changing the game.
Boost your savings when you open a money market account at Royal Credit Union. For a limited time, you can get a $1,250 bonus when you bring $100,000 or more in new money to open a personal or business money market account. Royal's money market accounts have no monthly maintenance fee and tiered rates, so higher balances earn more. See details and open a money market account today at rcu.org/earn-more. Minimum deposit of $100,000 required to obtain bonus. Offer ends 5/24/25. Insured by NCUA.
Hey, have you been dreaming of a lake cabin lifestyle with boating, fishing, and family fun in northern Minnesota? Well, lately I've thought a lot about how cool it would be to have a getaway like so many Minnesotans. And if you're like me, you probably think that owning your own lakeside getaway is beyond your budget. Well, if you think lake cabin real estate prices keep going up, well, think again. This is Russo, and I'm here to tell you there is an affordable way to enjoy a cabin lifestyle and all that goes with it. And yes, I said affordable. I founded a Clamshell Beach Resort, which is located on the Whitefish chain of 14 lakes for you and your family to enjoy. Here's how. Clamshell has lake homes that offer deeded fractional ownership, and the keywords there are deeded and fractional. You own it. Imagine having 5 weeks a year to enjoy Clamshell with its beaches, pool, and lodge that's full of kids' activities. Is golf your game? There's a great golf course right across the road. Like winter sports? Well, you can go ice fishing, cross-country skiing, or snowmobiling right out the door at Clamshell. And there's no maintenance, no grass mowing, no snow removal. It's done all for you. And you can own a share of Clamshell Beach Resort at an affordable price. To learn more about ownership opportunities at Clamshell Beach Resort, go to cottagesonwhitefish.com or contact Pat Egan at 612-220-9819. That's cottagesonwhitefish.com or Pat Egan at 612-220-9819. Back here, Worst Seats in the House, Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. April 7th is our next live show. That is at Tuttle's. I did say that at the beginning, right? Yeah. Okay, good. I know I said the date, but I don't remember if I said the location.
I think we did.
Okay, good.
If not, it's April 7th.
Yeah, April 7th at Tuttle's, 7 p.m. If I didn't say that at the beginning, just know that I'm an idiot. All right, let's go through some Twitter questions, Anthony, and then we'll wrap up the show. Somebody asked, my gut tells me big trade this summer is more likely than multiple splashy free agent moves. Two parts. Who's more likely to be used as a trade chip, Rossi, Ogren, or Urov? And do you think Boldy is, quote, untouchable? To your point, I would actually agree with that. I do think there's going to be some big trades. I just, like, you look at the free agents this summer, there's not a lot of big names. I still think that even if he doesn't have the greatest time in Colorado and they don't re-sign him, I still think the Wild will go after him. Besser's the one I actually, yeah, Brock Nelson. I actually don't think the Wild is going to be as into Brock Besser unless the price is perfectly right. And I think it's because they plan to go out and make trades. And I mentioned JJ Peterka is one name that I would be very interested in them going after. To do that, you would probably have to trade an Ogren and move like that. And then I do think, like, somebody asked me that, I guess Joe Smith on his podcast said that he believes that it's 70% that Marco Rossi is traded this summer. And if the person asked if I agreed with that, and I would actually say it's higher. I really genuinely get reading the tea leaves. I think that they're going to move him this summer, but we'll see. Would that be in a move for Turk, or would there be multiple moves? We'll see.
Yeah, I think there's a likelihood of a trade only because I don't think the free agent market is terrific. And so if you go into think about it, if you go into the free agent market and let's say you've got $10 million that you could spend, but there's not a player out there that's worth $10 million, the better move is to trade $1 million player for an $8 million player. And there you've used up your money in a way that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to. That's the only reason why I think there's maybe a likelihood that some of those deals get made. I don't think there's any chance Boldy gets moved. I would be shocked if Urov got moved. I think the more logical guys to trade if that's the scenario, would be Ogren or Rossi, guys that right now to another team might be attractive because of their low price tag. I don't think there's a need to move either one of those guys, but if that's what it takes to get the fit that you're looking for that isn't available as a free agent, you might have to. And Billy has shown that he's willing to consider just about anything. And there have been a number of times where we've thought, there's no way to make it work. There's no way to make it work. And then all of a sudden he's made a deal where you've said, well, wow, he figured out a different way to attack it. And I remember last summer, there were a number of times you said the same thing. You thought 80% Rossi's not going to be here next year. And then he turned out to be here. It all depends on what that value is in return. I don't know what teams are offering for Marco Rossi or would be willing to in the summer. If somebody came with a deal that was, let's say, a prospect that's scratching the surface of the NHL already, maybe even in the NHL already, but very young in his career, trying to think of guys who got moved recently. Let's say Logan Stankoven. Let's say all of a sudden somebody called with a guy like that. We'll give you this guy and a pick for Marco Rossi. Well, I think you have to consider that, but I don't know if that's the asking price. I mean, if the price is we'll give you a draft pick for, then I'd say no way. If it's for a more established scorer in the NHL that still has some term left, but maybe is a $6, $7, $8 million player, then maybe. Yeah. And I don't know I have no idea who those guys might be and who might be interested in a young player like Rossi, but you don't have to trade him.
Right.
He's a valuable piece of this team right now.
But they are so far apart on what they, what Rossi's camp thinks his value is versus the Wild. It's not even funny.
But that's
they're in different,
all that's true. But that isn't in and of itself a reason to trade a player because you have to make sure you get the return that's worth the player.
To your point, exactly. But it also tells you the difference in opinion between what they think Rossi's going to be here, which is why I get the impression that that they would consider this. But,
right.
We will see. Next question. Do you think that they would trade Jared Spurgeon this summer? Is it possible maybe to Edmonton for a draft pick? I actually think for the first time that this would be a possibility this summer. Just based on his age,
think
the
for a
cap
draft
hit.
pick, no.
Well, no, but based, but the idea of it, I think it's something they would consider. Again, I think they want to try to get Juracek in the lineup next year. Juracek versus Spurgeon. I don't know about that. I would think a smarter thing would be to try to move Bogosian. That would be my. I would think that make the most sense. But
if your goal is simply to get Juracek in the lineup, that would make more sense. Obviously, the return is not going to be as high.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it kind of depends on what else you're able to do. Because if you're able to make the kind of move we were just talking about, and you've got a roster that you think, all right, we can make a run with this group.
Right.
You got a better chance to make a run with Jared Spurgeon in your top 4 than you do with David Juracek.
Yes. JSTU, big fan of Faber, and last year was basically the first time he ever ran a power play, but he just looks out of place on power play 1. Why do you think they keep throwing him out there over that unit over Jared Spurgeon, or are they just waiting until Zev signs to shuffle up the power play D-men? What do you think on that? I definitely think that if Zev's going to play right away after they sign him, they'll throw him right on power play 1. I don't know if that means he'll play in the playoffs. We'll have to see. They never thought Faber was, but Faber was so good they played him in the playoffs. So we'll see what happens with Zev. But do you agree with that Faber doesn't look as comfortable? I think he's gotten actually better on power play 1 than earlier this season when I thought that it was time to make a bit of a change.
He's gotten better for sure. And we have to see how Boyum translates to the NHL. We're going off the assumption that what we're watching at the college level is going to translate. So let's assume that it does. If it does, he's more suited to run a power play than Brock Faber. But I think Faber has gotten better. And I think the more he plays it and the more comfortable he gets, he hasn't reached his ceiling yet as a player. And he does bring the ability to skate at the blue line. He brings the ability to shoot. I don't know that he's what you'd call a true playmaker from the top on the power play. Boyum appears to have more of that based on what I've seen. I wouldn't give up yet on Faber being able to run maybe your second power play, though.
Yep. Ryan says, if we make the playoffs, we have Trenyan and Foligno who bring some physicality up front. We all know the playoffs, though, is a different beast. How are we going to get past the first round one with this is his word, soft playing JoJo, Gaudreau, Rossi? We have no grit or FU. One thing before you answer that question, so I sat with Barry Trotz for like an hour just shooting the breeze with him in the lobby of the hotel the other day. And we started talking about Trenyan and how he was dead right in my story at the beginning of the year. He's like, it wouldn't shock me if he scores 20 goals, but it wouldn't shock me if he scored maybe 8 or 9. But the one thing that he did say is he still believes that the investment the Wild made on Trenyan, and by the way, the reason why they traded him to Colorado last year was because they were also hearing what Trenyan wanted and they were not going to go there. But he does feel that the investment the Wild made in Trenyan was for the postseason, and that the regular season, he just, sometimes can't bring it every night, that he still thinks that the jury should not be come to a final decision on Trenyan until we see him in the playoffs. And if he can make an impact there, he thinks he can. I don't know if you agree. To the overall tone of the question, do you agree that the Wild are not gritty enough up front to get past, to go and win a round against the Dallas? I mean, we've seen it before.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the game has changed where that's not as big a part of the game as it once was. I don't know. The game gets more intense and the game does get more physical, but it isn't as night and day as it used to be. And I think it really depends on who you play. And I love Vegas's defensive core, and they're a handful to penetrate. There's no doubt. Marco Rossi's not going to run anybody over. He's not going to intimidate anybody, but he has shown a willingness to go to the blue paint all season long against everybody. Now, he hasn't had his best nights against the biggest, strongest, toughest, but neither does anybody else. And, Gaudreau, Johansson, those aren't the guys that if you put Eriksson Ek, Kaprizov, those guys aren't afraid to go to the paint.
And it'll be interesting to see Boldy. I think Boldy showed in the Four Nations that he's willing to go to those dirtier areas. And I think that he also knows the criticism in his first 2 playoffs with the Wild has been fast, furious, not just from the fans and the media, but his GM. And so I think that we'll see a different player there. To your point, they'll have a healthy Eriksson Ek. They didn't have that last time they were in the playoffs. Kaprizov is gritty as hell. So we'll see. I mean, the jury
no
is out.
question about it that the games get more physical. I actually think it's more, my bigger concern is the Wild on the back end, is the guys like Spurgeon and Brodin who are so critical to this team. Can they withstand that kind of physical play for multiple rounds of the playoffs, where their bodies at the end of a season they've been broken down a little bit this year and last year, and can they continue to play at the level that they play, where the hits are just, the checks are finished a little bit more often and a little more physically?
And to that point, and again, this is assuming they're healthy. This is why I don't see Buium playing in the playoffs, at least right off the hop. Like, we know how much appreciation the Wild coaching staff has in Johnny Merrill. They're not pulling out Jake Middleton or Jonas Brodin. I don't buy right now that they are going to just, if they're not willing to put David Juracek, who they gave up a fortune for, over Zach Bogosian, I don't think that they're just going to, after Johnny Merrill's been here for as long as he has been, not only this season, but in past seasons, they're just going to pull him out of the lineup for a rookie.
Yeah, it's all... You made the point earlier, nobody thought Brock Faber was going to play.
Right.
And then he was so good in those first couple of games. You don't know. What if Buium jumps in and all of a sudden you're looking at a younger version of Jonas Brodin skating with more offensive upside.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, well, how do you not play this guy? But you may also look at a guy and say, okay, he looks like he's got all the skills we thought he had, but he's 1 game into his NHL career. We're not putting him into the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Bruce asks, has Hines done enough to warrant the Jack Adams award because they're so close to Colorado? I mean, he's done a hell of a job this year, but I don't think anybody's getting it over Stefan Carberry, Scott O'Neill. Dean Evison, obviously the Blue Jackets have starting to take a step back here. Let me ask a couple others, Anthony, and then we'll wrap up the show. Gus is playing great, huh?
He's been terrific.
Unbelievable.
Really good. And I think this homestand was important.
Mm-hmm.
It was games every other day without travel in between. So there was no reason for him to be fatigued. And I think the way the Wild gave him the reins and said, let's see, take it and run with it, said 2 things. Number one, they know if they're going to go anywhere in this postseason, it's going to be riding Gus. Number 2 is, Gus, it's time for you to be the man. So right now, this is what the playoffs are going to feel like. You're going to be playing every other night, and the practices and everything in between are going to be limited. So get yourself into the physical and mental state to be ready to go in this case. And I think he's really been good. Even the St. Louis game where the Blues got 5, Gus was really good early in that game.
Yep. Faber, ex-Buium, Marner and Troyer goes, any idea of how many newcomers are going to slot in next year from Iowa? Any concern in the front office regarding backup goaltender with Wallstedt's instability in the AHL? I don't see too many guys being promoted from Iowa yet. I mean, Hunter Hates
if you count Ogren as one.
Yeah.
But
Hunter Haight, Ogren, unless he's traded. Hunter Haight obviously has had a really quality year down there, but I would think that they're going to want him to play right away but down there some more. Wallstedt, I don't know what's going on. Like, again, he's hurt. Like, it's constant.
I really haven't followed that story at all, so I'm not I have no inside information on it, or really even an opinion.
Wild Boy is 59. Thoughts on Gus Nyquist's game? I thought he's been good on the PK. He's playing better. What do you think?
Better. He's been off. And I think last night or the Wednesday night game against Seattle was a great example. There were 4 or 5 times where pucks just seemed to hop over him. They continued to find him. There was one play, Hartman made a great play, and he didn't seem ready for the return pass. I think he's fighting it a little bit right now, and a couple of assists here in recent games maybe will help get him going. His skating's been fine. His penalty killing has been good. We're talking about a guy who scored 75 points last year. We're not talking about back in his day. He scored 75 last year.
Right.
He has scoring in him, but he hasn't been as noticeable or made the kind of impact that he made the year before that when the Wild brought him in.
Somebody asked about college free agents. The Wild have, I believe, had some interest in that Gleb, what's his name? I don't even know how to pronounce it. Vermiev for Colorado College. He's described as a kind of a big, good skating center that wins draws. They've had some interest in him. I don't know. I know they sent some scouts out there, including Matty Hendricks, which tells you that they're interested. Western Michigan's in town here for the Frozen Faceoff. They have a kid named Tim Wash that also has some size that I think the Wild have interest in as well. But we'll see. I get that they're lukewarm this year on college free agents, probably also because they don't want to burn a deal because obviously Boyum's what they're doing, what they're waiting for. Somebody asked me what's up with Mikko lately. He was assistant GM for the Four Nations Finland team. I actually chatted with him for a while in the press room in Montreal, and he looked like he could still play. Somebody asked when a player is out injured, whether it's long-term or only for a few games, do they still draw a full paycheck? That answer is yes. And a final question of the show is a perfect one. Dave wants to know how we are going to celebrate the end of the buyout dead cap era. Throw a party?
Well, we're going to celebrate it in Barcelona because that's when it will officially have just ended. It'll have ended at free agent signing day, July 1, 6 days earlier. Mm-hmm. So we'll celebrate it with a Tempranillo in Barcelona.
Okay, perfect. By the way, somebody also asked me about the possibility of Rossi getting offer sheeted. That is a possibility. I'm actually doing a huge story on offer sheets in the next week or so. I talked to a bunch of GMs, and I'm going to be calling a bunch of agents this week because the cap's going up. So the feeling is, all right, could there be more offer sheets? But the other thing is that would make teams less vulnerable for offer sheets as well. So we'll see. There, basically the hypothesis is that nobody seems to know, but it is much more socially acceptable than it used to be. Like years ago, oh my God, if you offer sheet somebody, it was like considered the worst thing in the world. Thanks to our incredible sponsors. And again, April 7th is our next live show. That is at Tuttle's at 7 p.m. Definitely come on out to that. And then on March 26th at Parley Kitchen and Bar, you can join, come to the first ever Talk North Sports Report Live. That is with Mark Rosen hosting and sitting down with John Krasinski, Lavelle E. Neal III, Jim Suhan, and myself. We're trying to make that sort of like the old, remember what was the show that they used to have with Sid Hartman and Mike Max and Lavelle? And what'd they call that?
Was it...
sports show or sport?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're hoping for. Thanks to our incredible sponsors and for joining us today at the Aquarius Home Services studio. Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatment systems, heating, cooling, plumbing, electrical, everything. Royal Credit Union, Twill in the Edina Galleria, Feller's Ranch, Onyx Maps, Clamshell Beach Resorts, and Giggly THC Beverages. Talk to you next week, everybody.
So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world won't forgive